following is a fiction podcast made by college students studying biotechnology, not experts in the matter of aquaculture. Discretion is advised. Do not do this at home without a previous and extensive research. Thank you. This podcast called Saving Memo, where we'll talk about aquaculture of endangered species all around the globe. For this, today is joining us an expert aquaculturist of Pseudothelphusa dugesi, aka the crab of the Barrancas or the cliff crab. Fernando, be very welcome.
Thank you, Susie. Hi.
Hi. To begin with, could you describe to us how do this crab looks like?
Of course. Well, the cliff crab is an endemic species of Mexico, native to Monterrey, Nuevo León, although it can be found in Colima to Puebla and the surrounding areas, naturally, where they tend to live near freshwater. These are brown arthropods that shed their exoskeleton, and they have 5 pairs of appendages, that is to say, 10 legs, 2 of which have the shape of a pincer. We call these the chelae. Its shell is actually a little bit longer than it is wide. This is a very small animal. It weighs 6 grams maximum, and they tend to measure somewhere between 1 and 10 centimeters, with their cephalothorax taking up most of it, being between 1 and 5 centimeters.
They sound great, and I know you cultivate them. Can you tell us why?
Of course. Well, mainly it's as a way of preserving the species, with a potential repopulation in their own natural habitats. The thing about the cliff crab is that it's officially classified as an endangered species according to the Mexican norm NOM 059. This is due to a habitat loss from urbanization and stream pollution. They are very sensitive to water quality and often die because of stress, crayfish pathogens, or contamination in general. Conserving this species is crucial to protecting the biodiversity of the areas they live in, especially its aquatic ecosystems, since crabs as a whole play a key role as an organic matter recycling species. For this, we've established a semi-intensive crop. This allows us to have a bit of a balance when it comes to controlling the conditions to preserve the species.
If you need to control the water quality so much, why didn't you go for an intensive approach?
Well, an intensive system could have made sense, but it would have been more expensive and impractical. These are mostly used when you need to produce something in massive quantities, like when you want to sell fish or shrimp for the purposes of consumption, and that's not exactly what we're doing here.
Oh, wow, perfect. And tell us, where is it located? What facilities do you have there?
Well, our facilities are located near Laguna Juruapan in Colima, right here in Mexico. We actually have 3 rectangular fiberglass tanks, each of them measuring 5 meters by 3 meters, being a little bit less than half a meter high. They have enough space for the crabs to move freely and without stress within them. Their design will reflect their natural habitat. Inside, they are a bit uneven, so that they can have a water area and a soil area, which we will provide using clay soil or sand, in order to facilitate the construction of their own burrows. There will also be shelter areas, vegetation, rocks, logs, and PVC pipes. The shaded areas will be very important to them to avoid overheating. These tanks will be lined with a geomembrane to prevent water leaks. We plan to have a bit of an electrical energy generation and backup generators in order to ensure the continued operation of water pumps, aerators, and monitoring system just in case power outages were to occur.
Those crabs do require a lot of attention, don't they? What do you do to keep them healthy?
Well, we have several preventative measures in order to keep them safe. The first of them is daily monitoring of possible contaminants and the physical-chemical parameters of the water, along with portable multi-parameter kits for rapid analysis. We also limit the control access to tanks and the hygiene of the personnel. And in order to avoid cross-contamination between the tanks, we will actually have a different water supply for each of them. We plan to ensure the quality of all operational activities. This varies from their receipt of inputs to waste management. Keep the different work areas disinfected. We review the barrier and filter system constantly. We'll have weekly checks to detect signs of illness or stress in crabs. These tend to vary from lethargy, abnormal coloration, changes in their mortality patterns, and cannibalism is a particularly big and dangerous sign, as well as the separation of sick or aggressive individuals. It's important to note that we will actually be separating the crabs in different tanks, depending on whether they're male, female, inseminated females, or the juveniles, as well as specific reproductive management areas, in order to have small individual tanks for the early stages of their life and have better control of them, avoid problems of cannibalism.
That's amazing. Moving on, I have a question. Do you use natural or artificial light on the tank?
Well, we actually have a little bit of a combination of both. We plan to use polycarbonate sheets to use in the tanks in order to take advantage of sunlight. But at night we will be using red lights in order to minimize stress with the crabs. For the breeding areas, we'll be using low-intensity LED lamps as well, but care must be taken in order to not disrupt their circadian rhythms.
And you don't feel a lot of light?
Well, we'll talk about that in a moment.
Speaking of the offspring, how does the crab reproduction work in captivity?
Well, that's an interesting thing. The problem with these crabs is that in their natural state, their reproduction is a bit aggressive and can lead to death among them, which is why the reproductive cycle tends to begin with the rainy season, usually at the end of April and the beginning of May. These crabs are oviparous and they reproduce sexually, that is to say, they mate with each other and then lay eggs. After the eggs are fertilized, they will be expelled and attached to the mother's body, usually in the abdominal area, in an incubation process that will last somewhere between 10 and 30 days. Unlike other species of crustaceans, these crabs are born fully formed, with no larval stage, and they will almost directly integrate into the substrate, although they will stick close to their mothers for about 3 to 4 weeks until they manage to reach a form of maturity. In order to avoid that danger I mentioned, the fittest males will be selected and their sperm extracted from them, after which we will artificially inseminate the females during her reproductive cycle. The females will incubate their eggs on their abdomen for 3 to 4 weeks, as I mentioned, and after hatching, the babies will be transferred to their respective tanks in order for us to have a better care for them. During the juvenile stage, smaller tanks will be used instead of the ones from the adults, with a greater abundance of shelter for the babies. The population density will be adjusted as they grow, but at this stage we can have up to 50 juveniles per square meter, reducing this to 10 crabs per square meter when they are adults. Also, their initial diet is zooplankton and phytoplankton twice a day in adjusted quantities, but as they grow, the feeding requirements will change.
That's a big crab family. And how do you feed them?
Well, as I mentioned, the babies tend to eat zooplankton and phytoplankton. We can provide these by finding samples of water that possess it. But when it comes in the wild, these are omnivorous scavengers and opportunistic hunters. But calcium, protein, fruits, and vegetables are just essential for them. A crab in general will just eat whatever you place in front of it. But that doesn't mean we can feed them whatever. We have to be very careful about their nutritional balance.
I can imagine.
Of course. That's why the things we'll be feeding them will be commercial pellets, the kind of thing you would feed to a pet crab, for example, protein, insects, and plant material. The source of calcium should also be added. These can be either from natural sources or something called the wonder shell. It's a decorative shell that works as a source of minerals and calcium. The foods we'll be working with, which are recommended for crabs, will include various fruits and non-spicy vegetables, although it's important to note that it's not advisable to leave citrus fruits out for a very long time because of their very high sugar content, which can cause an algal bloom affecting the water quality. These crabs, as I may have mentioned, are very sensitive to different quality controls of the water. For example, their temperature needs to be only between 20 and 28 degrees Celsius. Their pH levels need to be 6.5 to 7.5. With low levels of ammonium nitrates, and a dissolved oxygen level of 5 to 6 parts per million with aerators. When you have an algal bloom, this diminishes the oxygen levels and increases the pH level in the tank, which in turn can affect the crabs so badly that they might die. That's why we can't leave these particular fruits out. I'm sorry, I went a little off topic.
That's perfect.
We also have to give them proteins. In this case, we can give them anything from meat, beef and chicken, shrimp, fish, even pork. They can be either boiled or raw, depending on what we need to give them. Insects or freeze-dried krill. These are tiny, tiny little crustaceans that crabs just adore. As for how we can get them this stuff, the raw materials can be just purchased in bulk and stored in freezers. Crabs are not picky when it comes to this kind of thing. Commercial crustacean feed with high levels of protein and vitamins can also be added. Like I mentioned, the commercial pellets are quite useful.
Wow. Well, so far, you have told me a lot of things you do to take care of the crabs. I can imagine it's expensive. How much does it take to build a place like that?
Well, considering all the stuff that I described to you, the initial investment alone would be around 1 million Mexican pesos. Considering that we're dealing with glass tanks with geomembrane, aerators and filters in each of them, an electric generator, laboratory equipment, and general infrastructure. That's of course not considering the operational costs, considering consumption of water, electricity, the feeding of the crabs, the labor and human resources. We're talking about 3 people with a salary of 8,000. Basic cleaning maintenance, among other things, it will come up to around 70,000 Mexican pesos per month. And when it comes to maintenance, which is itself a different topic entirely, the repair and renewal of equipment, infrastructure maintenance, among other things, we can get to a conservative estimate of around 55,000 Mexican pesos annually. Of course, to mitigate all of these costs, we've considered adding some funding. We could get Semarnato or Conavio to give us financial support. There are financial support programs for conservation projects, such as this one. We can collaborate with research centers, with NGOs, or with universities, such as the UNAM or the UAM. Donations would also be accepted, crowdfunding in general.
Those are great options. Hey, Fer, but tell me, has anybody asked you what are the social benefits of cultivating small crabs?
Actually, they have, and there are some very tactile benefits to this. The cultivation of Pseudothelphusa dugesi can actually contribute to the generation of direct jobs in the operation of the plant. As I mentioned, we'll have to hire people to help out in this part. The tank maintenance, feeding the crabs, the monitoring of the water quality, checking on the reproduction, waste management, cleaning, biosecurity analysis, etc. All of this will require people who are looking over it. All of that means jobs, and indirect ones as well. That is to say, the suppliers of the different food, supplies, transport services, etc. Likewise, it can contribute to the education and environmental awareness of the community by offering some training in aquaculture. Species preservation and sustainability will all be things that they'll be learning about, and in turn could even enact on their own with other species in the area. By protecting an endemic species, the connection of the community with its own natural environment is reinforced, ensuring its protection and recovery. Eventually, with the release of individuals and the recovery of ecosystems, an improvement in the quality of life of people is expected. This crab is actually already part of the social life of a group of people here in Mexico. It is known as the spirit of Cuernavaca because it's an animal very loved by the people there. It would be extremely easy and extremely beneficious to get people to love it that much in Colima as well.
Okay, and how do you assess the environmental impact?
Well, the environmental impact can have some important aspects to consider. To begin with, when associated with the activities, equipment, or waste generated in this operation, such as the discharge of wastewater used for cleaning the tanks, this might contain nutrients, organic matter, or solvents. The GHG emissions due to the use of electricity, contamination of the area when waste disposal is involved, such as food scraps, excrements, antimicrobials, etc. If we are not adequate about this, it could potentially contaminate the area around. Likewise, the untimely release of specimens could alter some ecological dynamics. It's important to note that several of the things that we are using to help feed the crabs could lead to adult blooms themselves in the environment if we are not careful with this disposal.
Those seems like a lot. How did you mitigate them?
Well, we do have some things that we can help out with. First of all, we can treat the wastewater before we release it into the environment. We can properly manage that self-same waste. We can try to use renewable sources of electrical energy, perhaps something like solar panels. We can try to monitor the proper functioning of the equipment. The more efficiently the equipment works, the less electricity they will require, and therefore the less emissions they will produce. We could also have a constant monitoring of the physicochemical parameters of the water, the physical barriers to prevent the escape of individuals into the environment, and close filter and aerator systems, as well as biosecurity protocols.
Wow! Now I kind of want to set up crib of my own. Speaking of, what permits should I have or what norms should I consider if I want to build an aquaculture facility?
Well, first of all, the general law on sustainable fisheries and aquaculture is the basis for the management, conservation, protection, restocking, and the sustainable use of fishery and aquaculture resources, as well as the protection and rehabilitation of their ecosystems. So definitely reading up on that would be very helpful. And the decree number 391, that is to say the law on sustainable fisheries and aquaculture for the state of Colima. That's the one we had to check for this particular thing. There is the NOM 045, PESC 2007, which includes the responsible fishing of the moro crab in Campeche. It includes specifications for its use in particular for the moro crab, but it's a very useful basis for us to work from. We can kind of assume that it's going to have similar legislature attached to it. There's also the CONAPESCA 01028, which is the permit for the aquaculture development. In the future, this is something we're going to have to check in the future because it's mostly oriented towards research and development of biotechnologies and the cultivation of aquatic or semi-aquatic species. Now, in order to obtain authorization from the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, that is to say Semarnat, a detailed feasibility study must be submitted first, with environmental, social, and economical impacts, a management plan for biosecurity measures, infrastructure that meets quality and environmental sustainability standards, as well as wildlife management permits in UMAS. Other agencies to consider are the National Commission for Aquaculture and Fisheries, CONAPESCA, the Federal Attorney for Environmental Protection, PROFEPA, and the Federal Commission for Protection Against Sanitary Risks, COFEPRIS. It's important to have updated permits, so the renewal must be constant, but not to worry, this is usually free.
I can imagine. That sounds like hard but honest work. Fair. I'm glad to have you here in the program. You are our first invitee. Thank you very much. And dear audience, we're coming to an end. Now we know how the cultivation of Pseudothelphusa dugesi integrates specific actions to preserve this endangered species, with a sustainable design and analysis of social, environmental, and economic viability, always ensuring the well-being of the crabs by taking care of their feeding, health, and tank maintenance, and management of their reproduction, among others. With the preservation of the cliff crab, this project aims to contribute to the recovery of local aquatic ecosystems in Colima and, in the future, to the conservation of Mexican biodiversity, while generating social benefits such as employment and environmental education. All of this strengthens the connection between communities and their natural environments, promoting the sustainability and long-term protection of endemic biological resources. Fernando, would you like to share some tips or a final message to the audience?
Of course. Thank you very much for inviting me, Susie, in the first place.
Pleasure.
It's been my pleasure to share this topic with everyone here. Conservation is not only the responsibility of specialists or institutions, but of all of us. I recommend that if you want to venture into aquaculture projects like this one, you thoroughly research the needs of the species and comply with the regulations. Let's remember that small steps make a big difference, and that together we can achieve the preservation of our species and ecosystems. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for watching us, and see you in the next episode.
Bye-bye.